of all the AGMs which are happening in the month of April. I'm really grateful to all of you who have joined, and especially our speakers who've taken the time out on a Monday afternoon to do this. And I'm really, really grateful to that. And the theme for this topic is really about content in all its forms. Where are we now with content? Where is it evolving? Where are we going forward with it? And how do you allocate the right budget resources for it? But before I go into it any further, I'd like to hand over the discussion to Karan Bhandari. Karan is the Managing Director of Integrated Media Relations at Weber Shandwick India, and he will set the context for us about this topic, why are we discussing it today. Over to you, Karan.
Thanks, Parul. I'll quickly just spend a minute in setting up context, and that's really to help understand all the things that you were speaking about earlier, where this is more of jargon-based and cool terminology to throw at, as opposed to getting down to the depth of what it can mean for communication. And really, if you look back in the last, say, decade or slightly over a decade, at first there was digital, and then came social, very fast followed by mobile. And then started this huge hue and cry of integrated work, integrated comms, integrated marketing. And while this transformation is already underway, decentralization, meta, avatars, these are the newest kids on the block. So digital transformation, whether planned or unwittingly done, especially in the last 2 years, it's only fueling the fires across comms in the marketing space. And while all of this is happening, the definition of omni-channel has continued to expand, and it will keep on doing so in the next foreseeable years. So really, today's Chai Talk intends on exploring various aspects of this immersive experience of storytelling. So literally what we're trying to get down into is the stretch between the Web 1.0 to the Web 4.0, and literally everything in between. And if I could give slight analogy, and if you're into Nordic mythology, it's kind of like the giants, the Vanir and the Aesir all peacefully coexisting. So from the old to the new, all literally having their own spaces, their own forms, and continuing to evolve, but still serving a purpose and having a specific outreach to specific audience for a very specific action. And therefore, aptly titled, we call today's entire set of sessions as PR 4.0, the consume, create, and owned in the content era. And this episode will comprise basically of three engaging sessions. The first session is all about platforms in the time of omnichannel comms, which essentially is talking about an experiential platform such as Meta, its impact on media engagement, how therefore is the content strategy across new platforms, really cool terms such as AR creating opportunities for communication, NFTs, is it chill or thrill? Session two is more about how do you make things come to life, and all of that goes back to money, the budget. And therefore, it's all about the money, honey, budgeting for new ideas, high risk ideas, convincing the management about budgets, whether it's pitching, whether it's ROI, whether it's making case about things that you want to do because you want to be brave at the end of the day. And the final session will be building a strong content based campaign, literally, that works very hard when it comes to new channels, when it comes to talking to your audiences, when it comes to doing a solve. And in this case, we'll have a speakers also share a few case studies, and get down into various things that took place behind the scenes into making those campaigns come to life. So that literally is the agenda for today. And without further ado, I think I'll pass the baton back to Paru.
Thank you, Karan. That's perfectly summed up, and thank you for your time. While we start the discussion of the first panel, I'm going to give a very brief glimpse of the kind of speakers we have ahead of us. First up in the panel, we have with us Tohina Pandey, who's communications leader, IBM Global Digital Sales, India and South Asia. Welcome, Tohina.
Hey, Parul. Hi. Thanks.
Great to have you here. We also have Karan Pujpal, who's the communication lead for Instagram India. Welcome, Karan.
Karan Pujpal. Hi, everyone.
And last but definitely not the least, we have Senjam Raj Shekhar, who's the global communications lead at Mobile Premier League Welcome, Sanjam.
Thank you, Parul, and thank you for having me. And hi, everybody.
Hi. So before we start the questions, I'm just going to I'm running a very, very quick poll on the types of content that the audience sees as a priority. I'm just launching it while you all vote. We'll carry on with our discussion right here. My first question is for Tuhina. We'll go back and forth a little bit over the next half an hour or so. So it's going to be an exciting discussion. Stay tuned. Tuhina, my first question for you is that an often forgotten part of content evolution is the GDPR aspect of it and how it can really dictate and influence not just policy, but also how content is created, especially user-generated content. And if you look at the monopoly bit of it, that's the other part of it that GDPR, or not actually GDPR, but also countries like continents like Europe look at that. But coming back to GDPR, how do you think that influences content creation and consumption?
Right, Parul, and that's the larger context of the times we live in. Ultimately, policies translate into laws and regulations, and pretty much the code of conduct that we operate with in the system. So, to that extent, really, let's look at it. The whole data protection and GDPR, and every country today has a version of it, including India. This conversation has been there for the last 10 years or more, perhaps. But today, with the content monetization, user generated content, the talk of the creator economy and the content being the king, queen, and everything else is becoming more real. And that sort of is translating into laws and drafts and regulations, and therefore the content strategy has to fit in those swim lanes of those policy frameworks. So for example, is it that tomorrow if someone writes a testimonial for you or generates a content, do you need to pay them? What kind of credits are you going to give to user generated content? And should you have a push strategy, or should you be really discussing your brand campaigns in a closed boardroom, or should it be open to democratized sort of brand identity? And you're talking about gig economy where loyalties are thinner. So to that extent, I think that will inform. Will we really see that sort of translate and manifest on the ground in the next 18 months for our plans? No. But will we have pockets of experiment and that kind of, raising the head? Definitely yes. So a lot will depend on how we look at content, how we generate content, how we monetize content in the data world, Parul, so to say. That's a short one to a complicated question, really, or a discourse.
Absolutely. I'll come back to you, Tohina, for another question. Over to Sanjam, and then I'll bring in Karan Bhujbal again. Sanjam, my question for you is, when we were discussing this topic ahead of the session, you mentioned three types of content which are really driving content creation. Can you recap for us, and which of these do you think will begin to matter more as we go forward?
Thank you, Parul. I would say there was a time at one point of time in which, you could actually run a jingle saying, washing powder Nirma, and then the world will know about it. Essentially, those days and times have gone because of, great diversity in media, great diversity in consumption. The first one I would say would still be that. The first one and the primary one would be self-created content that company create. And when I talk about these three types of content, I'm actually looking at a campaign rather than something which is more permanent in nature. So let's say any company, organizations want to run, let's say, a marketing campaign, sales campaign, any campaign for that matter. The first thing that a company actually does is create a set of content. It could be a film, it could be a short ad film, etc. That really, I would say, remains the centerpiece of where you are, because your conversation starter and the conversation creator actually has to be your own content. I would say that is one. But however, that is not enough in this crowded space to gain attention. The second type that really comes in is what I would call expert content. of which I would say there are two types. The most famous, the most prominent ones that people are aware of is what is called influencer-led content. And I'm actually talking about expert influencers rather than pretend influencers. So for example, you're launching a phone, it could be a gadget reviewer. Similarly, it could be a fashion Instagrammer when you're launching a fashion lifestyle product. So those are one type of expert who actually add in a lot of credibility to what you're launching, to the product that you're launching, or a campaign you're launching. The second part I'd rather say, which is very important and which is something which I think as communication professional, it's something which is our domain, is really editorial platforms. Take for example, let's say Karan wanted to organize something for communications and PR professionals. Karan actually involved PR Moment in organizing it, because PR Moment is the expert in creating and curating content like this. And similarly, when we launched our Olympics campaign last year, we approached a sports website called The Bridge, which actually does a lot of Olympic sports, to actually create content for us. Similarly, we wanted people to know about stories behind our athletes, and we approached this platform called Humans of Bombay, who are well known for doing humanized kind of story, to do stories for us. So I would say that when we went, similarly for cricket, we went to a platform called CrickBuzz, which is the largest cricket platform. So expert content remains as, I would say, the second leg to this campaign, adds credibility. Third one is UGC, user generated content. Unfortunately, this area is something which is very cluttered, very confused, and you get a lot of 60 to 70% of what you get is actually not very relevant, but you still need that to get the buzz going. From our experience now, is that from a UGC perspective, I would say Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, while they're still there, not very good for UGC. I would say the newer platforms, the short video platforms in India specifically, which is Moj and MX Takata, does wonderfully well. TikTok, I believe, does great in other parts of the world. But I would say from a content perspective, you normally for a campaign, you need these three types of content to sort of make your content strategy, and your, not just content strategy, make your entire marketing strategy wholesome.
Thank you, Sachin. That's a very valid point and well noted about the user-generated content. It is really a cluttered market, but if it hits right, it really goes a long way. With that, over to Karan, then I'll come back to Hina with the remaining questions. Karan, what is, given how Reels operate, and that's also almost, that is entirely user-generated content, how do you think brands can best leverage these kind of short video formats?
I think it comes down to understanding the consumer, journey, and what is like, so first, who's your customer? Is it B2B, B2C? Second is what's in culture, what's trending right now, and where are young people really, where they really are. That's the space with which Reels operates. I think it's become very clear that increasingly short form is the way people like to consume content. They want to entertain, and they also want to create short form content. There are finer nuances to it. I mean, it's short form, but honestly, it is harder to create more short form than long form content. But when it comes to brands, I think the core way to think about it is that think as a content creator, to be honest, and think what's the way in which you can entertain audiences using this, short form format. I think that's the way in which you operate it. And then it also comes down to understanding the life cycle from a brand's point of view. Of course, you need to do it, and a lot of brands have experimented and used it from just the point of view of establishing brand salience. But then there will be questions about sales. And even over there, I mean, we've run campaigns with brands where they've used Instagram as well as short form platforms, like Reels, to reach their target audience. For instance, we did a campaign with Spotify around Holi last year, where they worked with a number of influencers to drive traffic to a particular Holi playlist they had. And that really gave that playlist a big boost around a topical day for them. So there are, business results. And then I think the other way to also look at it and to understand is the way short form content is really democratizing content creation all across India. I mean, on Reels itself, today on a weekly basis, you have trends that are in, Bengali, Haryanvi, Rajasthani. You have such fine regional trends and such a strong cohort of young creators, these new superstars who are coming up, because of which last year we actually released a list called the 25 under 25 Instagrammers of India. And a large majority of them were from small towns, small villages.
That's really interesting. Karan, I have one question for you before I go over to Tuvina. I know there's no cut and right answer, but at what point in your campaign life cycle is short video best used? Is that something you should take off with? Because I know the typical question that clients have is that I can't spend so much on influencers right away.
I think those are two different things. I mean, spending on influencers, you can work with them to not just a short form, but for a variety of ways. So that's one. Second is, at what stage of your platform do you use, of your campaign do you use short form? I think it's still early days. I mean, once Reels was launched, for the longest time, there were no Reels ads. There wasn't any branded content, and things were working on a more organic basis, because that's the way in which Meta thinks. Like, we first launch products, give it sufficient time for things to test, run, and then start monetizing it. Around 6 to 8 months back, we introduced Reels ads, and a few months after that, we introduced branded content. So actually, it's been a journey, and that's the reason why brands are also newly getting onto the platform. So there's no clear answer on what's the right way or right duration in your campaign from which you want to use short form video. I think it comes back to what your objective is and who your customer is.
Thank you, Karan. Going to come to Tuvina next, and then I'll request Sanjam to weigh in with his opinion. Tuvina, flowing from what Karan said about the campaign life cycle and when you should enter it with short form video, you've seen now that companies are acting like publishers and almost like newsrooms themselves with the rise of own media. That's happening, and Sanjam, of course, was instrumental in Flipkart Stories. And later in this session, we're going to have Rajat from Microsoft Stories talk about that experience, which both of them used a very editorial come SEO approach. Keeping that in mind, Tuvina, how do you sort out this? I am a company making computers and chips, but I also am a newsroom.
Absolutely. So whether we like it or not, the newsroom is happening simply because not just the fact that you are a publisher, but you're a publisher with a deadline. And you have a crisis in reputation management, you have a point of view, you have a news cycle that you want to respond to, and all that has to happen in a quick pace. So all of us in that sense are corporate journalists, while of course we wear the communications hat. So that is a reality. How do you sort of, balance in terms of, first of all, raising awareness of the stakeholders outside and inside? Internally, your business stakeholders don't really care whether you're a communicator or whether you're a marketeer or what your role is, or you're a social media evangelist, or you're a brand micro influencer. They are just so confused at this point in time. They need business outcomes. So the connective tissue, and that is where this line has to work beautifully for each corporate, and they need to define it for themselves to deliver business outcomes, and then raise the awareness of what we really do and how we do. And from an external point of view, I think how you respond to the users, for instance. And we talked about user generated content. We are also creating audiences, because who will consume that content? A lot of content is, frankly, your traditional audience sets won't buy or consume. So when you have new set of consumers and users, you're actually creating audiences to consume the content that is being generated. So it's actually a much larger play out there. And I would go back to what Sanjam or even Karan said. Ultimately, it's about what's my objective, what's my return on objective, and what are my battles I choose to play. And that kind of synergistic relationship, we have an anchor point or a vantage point that we have to play both internally and externally, and keep defining it within the corporate journey and the evolution of our space. So yes, I mean, seesaw and sometimes a nice, lovely balance.
I know that I had a chance to interview Ray Day when he was heading Global Comms, and the kind of push he did for video is quite extraordinary. It was a massive video content push which was done, and the kind of integration they did was really quite amazing. Given what is the one thing I think, Tuhina, because the audience will be looking for a not like a primer, but at least some suggestions on if you were to start your own have a newsroom editorial approach. Uh, can it really be an editorial approach, or is it nice content but branded content? What are your one or two suggestions if I want to set up my own newsroom as a company?
Right. So, Parul, editorial is where the differentiation is, to my mind. Even when we talk about paid content, you will see the brief is always about, I don't want it to come across as a paid content because there is a credibility trade off somehow associated with that. Ultimately, even when you are actually doing paid content, you're outsourcing owned content in some sense. So I think the editorial voice or the brand voice has to be very sharp across the board because that is the point of view. And in today's cluttered market, if you really want to be heard or seen, then you have to have a sharp brand voice. And if you don't have that editorial uh, compatibility, so to say, if I won't read up my own stuff, then why would someone else pay? And that's what I think that's the differentiation.
Sanjam, over to Sanjam. Sanjam, when Flipkart Stories first started, it would be interesting to know what were the questions that you asked yourself when you were talking before the session. You had mentioned some very clear-cut approaches that you had towards the content, apart from its journalistic editorial value. It would be really nice to get an insight from you on what is the thinking behind Flipkart Stories.
Yeah, when I started Flipkart Stories, we are very clear on two or three things. Number one is not going to be a blog. A lot of companies have blogs, is not going to be a blog. And number two is not going to be a newsroom. So it's neither a newsroom nor a blog, but it's going to be a storytelling platform. And that's why the essence of the name, which is Flipkart Stories. And the people, and I'm also very clear that the people that we are going to hire for Flipkart Stories will come from an editorial background. So we'll have an editor-in-chief, we will have a desk who does rewrites, edit, we'll have reporters, we'll have designers, and we'll have people who knows SEO and analytics. So it's like we essentially started a media platform. And the brief to the team was that you will go and find stories. Now, it's very easy to set up a storytelling platform because you own the platform. Why will people come there? Why will people come and visit? You need to have, so therefore your stories cannot be, your stories need to have all elements of stories. They need to have conflict. They need to have some kind of, drama. All of that must happen. And how do you make an e-commerce company interesting? And so our data analysts, for example, started looking at the data and figured out, okay, there's some interesting towns. One of them is called Jhumri Talaiya. A lot of people know about it, started buying from Flipkart. I said, okay, Jhumri Talaiya, what are people buying? They're buying jeans, they're buying mobile phones. I said, okay, Mr. Editor, go and plonk yourself in Jhumri Talaiya for 3 days, find out a story and come back. And he wrote a story on Jhumri Talaiya. Similarly, we hired a writer, who's actually he's a non-fiction best-selling author, told him, okay, go to Naxalbari, Maoist movement was on, figure out what is happening in Naxalbari. He found out Naxalbari is now completely capitalist in that sense. And Naxalbari story came out, why people from Naxalbari, we went to Wasapur, then we went to Pokhran, then we also went to Mughal Sarai. And that was the last, and the story came out on the day when Mughal Sarai changed its name to the new name it is now. And then it became topical. So one is finding stories, and the stories that you find on Flipkart Stories, even now, you can find, it is as good as, coming out in India Today or Outlook. That's one. Second one is that from an SEO perspective, can we do something on an SEO? Even now, as you go, finish this, or even as I talk, type Flipkart fraud on Google. And the first result that will come out, the first set of results, the first 2-3 results will come out is Flipkart Stories. So there are a lot of people have fraud happening on Flipkart, but if you type Flipkart fraud, it comes Flipkart Stories. So that's an SEO which was actually done. So if you look at so number one, I think credibility, number two, SEO, so a lot of things which actually we put together to make sure that Flipkart Stories at that point of time, at least, stood true to that kind of ethos or whatever it stood for. And we even used it. For example, we had senior management who quit, leadership quitting at that point of time. Huge this thing. We actually put up a story, and you'll find that story. So there's a gentleman called Ankit Nagori. Ankit, and when he was quitting, we actually put that story up on Flipkart Stories. How Ankit became a star, and that the next day people were not talking about, oh, leadership quit at Flipkart. People are talking about how great Ankit Nagori was. So there was a story which was put in the day before, just a day around you quit. So if you look at it, there was a lot of thinking that went behind how stories will be placed, where stories will be placed. These are not just random stories put together. One interesting. We even curated an event. For example, we realized that there was a lot of transvestites actually buying from Flipkart. So we actually created an event where transvestites came in and said, okay, we love buying online because we are not questioned. We are not turned away, shooed away when you go to the mall. So from a platform perspective, I would say data, and treat it like any other media platform, you'll not go wrong. However, it requires investment. It's not easy. It's easier to set up a newsroom, easier to set up a blog. It's an investment that one puts in, and it can strike in well. We are doing, close to 1 million at its peak, close to 1 million, which is huge. And this is not based on any referral from Flipkart.com or any referral from the Flipkart app. These are organic traffic, 500,000 to 1 million, million around Big Billion days, 500,000 usually around regular times. Yeah, that I would say is in short, my experience with Flipkart Stories.
That's amazing. And 500,000 to 1 million is amazing. I don't think many news websites can boast of those kind of figures. So it's really pretty amazing. And the other thing I take away from this is, what is it about Jhumri Talaiya? How come it ends up in our popular, there was the All India Radio Jhumri Talaiya, and there's a Flipkart Jhumri Talaiya. So quite an interesting city probably. With that, I'll go over to Karan. Karan, my question to you is that, what do you see sitting at Instagram? What do you see as the content trends which are emerging? And Sanjay very rightly said, some of these cost money. I mean, if you have to set up a newsroom which is beyond a blog, all of these things cost money. Do you see a situation where one could do like a video newsroom in, of course you can do that, but I think very simply my question is, what are the content trends in video that are emerging?
Firstly, very, very interesting. Facebook, Flipkart Stories. We have something similar actually. It's the @Instagram handle on Instagram, and it's the world's most followed social media community with around 500 million followers, and that has a similar editorial approach. Like, it isn't a community where we've launched this feature, but it's purely editorial to put a spotlight on interesting people. When it comes to content trends, on a larger scheme of things, it's very clear India is a video first country. I think video is super prominent. I think the more we realize it and understand it and leverage it, the easier it will be for us. We all consume a lot of video every day, but for our everyday stories that we want to communicate from our profession, I don't know how much emphasis do we put on video. A simple feature like live, honestly, I think a few people underestimate it. If you go live and say even 200 people or 100 people are live, you need to equate that to an on-ground event. And I think all those things became clear during the pandemic as well. So video is the first thing that I'd outline. I think short form video is another thing that I already deep dive into. I think it's fast booming. I think it's fast booming. I think we're seeing a lot of young people take up short form video to showcase their talents and really rise up, the fame chart, and also just break out. These are the new stars of social media now, and they're not based in the big cities. They don't speak English, and it's amazing to have them. So short form is increasingly, creating trends, and a lot of innovation happening in that space. The third I would say is regional content. I think that's also something that we are seeing more prominently happen year after year. I think more and more people from those regional cities are showcasing, highlighting their talents. I think the creator ecosystem would be the fourth one that I would say is still interlinked to trends in storytelling and the content space. I think in general, creators really epitomize social platforms like Instagram, and they've become hugely important to brands as well because they really push culture forward. I think just in the past 2 weeks, I was realizing how many of these creators, or rather, how many of the Bollywood actors, like the established old school ones, like an Ajay Devgan, John Abraham, Vidya Balan. I was seeing them in the past 2 weeks promoting their films, collabing with social media creators. Even Amir Khan for his upcoming movie, which is going to come up like in November. So that's just like testament to the way creators are rising and the way they're pushing culture forward, and they're making a difference. I don't think influencer marketing is just like a buzz creation measure anymore. There are sufficient case studies to prove that it actually moves business results. So those would be, four trends that I'll outline. One was video, second is short form, third was regional, and the fourth was the creatorverse. Something really interesting, though, I find is I always find it interesting when trends go global and when global creators latch on to Indian trends and movements. I think that is really remarkable. I think the rise of people like Kili Paul, who is like who stays in a village in Tanzania, is a good example, and we have seen so many more. Ricky Pond is another one. He's like the dancing dad of Instagram, and he dances like on Indian tunes mostly. I think those are super cool examples of the way global people have, participating in Indian trends, and a lot of Indian trends are going global. I think the Pushpa, the movie Pushpa, was one of the longest lasting trends for us on Reels. It lasted for like 6 months, had around 12 million views to its Reels. Shark Tank memes, I think, were omnipresent on Instagram for quite some time. What else? Even the song Kacha Badam, I think, it was sung by that peanut seller in a village in West Bengal. And he is the hero of the story, though he never came onto Instagram. There were two young people from Kolkata who uploaded that audio and danced on it, which really made things go viral. And a lot of global creators have latched on to all the three of these micro trends that I'm speaking about. So those are a few things on the content front that we've seen.
Thank you. Kacha Badam really gets to you. You coming and going, you can't help. It's a real earworm, as they call it. So very, very interesting to hear your summary of the trends: video, short form video, regional, as well as the creator universe. That is what we're looking at as content strategies. Just to give you all a brief, what the audience has felt about what kind of content will matter. I see quite a shift because a lot more people are saying in our audience today that own media will matter. It's in fact mattering almost as much as earned media, and far ahead of paid media, which is quite interesting because if I did this poll even a year and a half back, it would still be about earned media. So that's quite a change. It's very interesting. Last set of questions for a panel before it's also open for questions. Anybody who has a question can please drop it in the window. Also running the second poll about what kind of content formats do you see as a priority. While the poll is running, Tuhina, my question to you is of course about the entire, the metaverse, bit of it, experiential marketing, bit of it. What kind of uptake do you think is happening for content creators around that?
So here's the thing.
And brands, more importantly, brands.
Sure. So here's the thing. The buzz was always there. It's just sort of, there was blockchain, there was Internet of Things, there is 5G, there is Metaverse, and there will be other multiverse and many, many to come. From my point of view, I think we've been in that space for a while. It's an extension of the so-called hybrid world that we live in, especially in a post-pandemic world, I think the whole metaverse context has widened and deepened and become more relevant in conversation. But let's look at gaming, let's look at experience led sort of, remote engagement with the audience. Let's look at politics and how campaigns are conducted, and the holograms and what's been happening in the studios, and how, for instance, a lab visit or an experiment visit is done with the AR, VR sets. Those things have been happening in pockets for a while. I think the question is, now do we see it scaling, and do we see a lot of people, the whole thing about NFT and what does it really mean, and what's my digital identity, and what's the digital barter going to look like? All of that is in pockets. From my perspective, I think it's an extension of the hybrid world. And will my mother have a better experience shopping or doing a worship on pilgrimage somewhere? Or my friend can design a home way before? Or can I set up a museum or a mall or a coffee house? Or can we have this conversation in Metaverse? Is a natural extension. How is it really picking up? Lots of experiments, and it will slowly filter in. It won't be a big bang, I feel. It'll probably be a much more like a slow flow as we go through the metaverse world, but it will manifest in bits and pieces before it becomes a larger trend.
Thank you. Sanjam, over to you. What is the gaming industry's experience with the metaverse?
Okay, first, let me just talk about metaverse in that context. Even the company that changes name to Meta, the founder actually said that it's 8 to 10 years away at least. Metaverse in that form. Unfortunately, what is happening right now is that a lot of people and companies are jumping onto it, and they claim that they have done this on Metaverse, they've done that on Metaverse. For people who are listening in right now, when you have time after this, you go to YouTube. There's Gujarat Titans, the new IPL team, actually launched their logo on Metaverse, and that was launched on a platform called Spatio. And you should see that to actually realize why this hype is actually not worth it. There's a platform called Roblox where kids actually create a lot of games. There are 40 million games on Roblox. Even games created by average kids on Roblox have much better graphics, much better visual, much better this thing than what the Gujarat Titans did on Spatial. Similarly, you should go to something called Yokeverse. There are the first wedding that happened. There's a first sponsored by Fable Chocolates. There's something called a Holy Party. Have a look at that, and you realize how far away from what we are if kids on Roblox can create those kind of games. Unfortunately, it's become a term. So people want to chase headlines. They go and say, okay, we've done this on Metaverse. There are some experiments, but I would say those experiments are primarily happening in the gaming space. What is the reality right now is not Metaverse. The reality is Web 3.0 is going to be a reality. Blockchain is going to be a reality. I would say decentralized web. Those are the NFTs. They are a reality right now. You go to OpenSea, which is the platform which is the largest platform for NFTs, and there's a large amount of traffic happening on OpenSea, the large amount of transactions happening on OpenSea. And I would say that if there is a sector that is really on all these platforms on the first step towards the metaverse, I would say the gaming companies are. You go to Minecraft, already Minecraft, Roblox. The first steps of metaverse are there. The Ariana Grande concert that happened on Fortnite. So I would say if you were to look at that space where people actually live on it, people entertain themselves, socialize, that's where the gaming world is. But more important, there's one more trend which is coming, which I'd like to tell everybody. Can you earn money on the metaverse? So can you earn money by actually playing games? So there is a new segment which is coming called Play to Earn. And there is a company called Axie Infinity. Companies have, companies called Sky Mavis. They actually launched a game called Axie Infinity, where there are lakhs of people earning literally by playing games. And these are, I'm not talking about, advanced countries. I'm talking about in Philippines, there are people who actually left their jobs and they're playing games to earn money. The people, those and it's happening in Venezuela as well. So I would say that, yes, it is a buzzword. You say attach metaverse to anything, people write about it on social media and on media. But I would say that the first real universe is really the gaming universe where I come from.
And Arul, if I can make just a small point, just continuation to Sanjay, I think the immediate issue is the hybrid world. How do you connect and engage with audiences in close proximity, not so close proximity, across the time zone? How do you manage cultures in the digital age where there are different subscriptions in a hyper connected world? I think the problem at hand is just making meaning out of this hybrid world and the workspaces and the homes of the future. That is where the cookie is crumbling while we are on that sort of journey to metaverse and whatever verse that looks like.
That's really interesting, Tuvina. Karan, a quick final comment from you on video trends, and if it's the one thing that brands can do before to launch. If I have to launch a short video thing, what's the one? What is the starting point for them? We have questions coming in from the audience, so a short final comment from you on short video, and then we'll take questions.
I think probably the way to test or experiment with anything is just to see like what's the just test or experiment with it. I mean, a lot of brands are already working with creators, so why don't you work with creators? And we have a feature called Collab, which I think a lot of people already know. So why doesn't the brand do a collab post with a creator? And that's an easy way for you to test out the waters with short form video, because you're already doing that. It's just a small toggle that you have to turn on, and that short form video will be on your account as well. And I think that's the first step, for you to take. And probably the second point I can make, which also answers your earlier point, Parul, which was about how can you start your own video, storytelling platform, something like that you asked me. I think, testing, experimenting, and honestly keeping things simple. I mean, you don't need to complicate it. I think the most successful creators out there and the most successful brands who have interesting content on their social accounts are the ones who are consistent. It's not necessary that all of their copies and posts are absolutely creative or mind-boggling. But the fact is that they know their consumers and they are consistent. I think those are the two key points. So even if you want to put out a spokesperson video or an AMA every Friday, just be consistent, do that thing, or experiment with short form video, post one with a creator every week. But find your fit, experiment, test, and keep things simple, be consistent.
That's actually great advice. Turn on the collab feature and be consistent. I can take only one question. We've run a bit over time for this session, and we have Megha, Rajat, and Sonal waiting for us. Poonam Thakur from Process Ventures has a question. Poonam, would you like to unmute yourself and ask?
Sure, Parul. Thank you for that. And thank you for the session. Great to see Sanjam live after so many years.
Hi, Poonam.
Hi. So my question really is very basic, away from the buzzword, but I really wanted to get this panel's view on how do you see slow social, which is essentially podcasts and subscription-based newsletters, taking over the content mix, especially given that in the post-pandemic era, there's been an overwhelming, content fatigue. So I know Karan gave us some very interesting factoids and numbers there, but speaking from personal experience and also as PR practitioners, we've seen that, there's just so much digital exposure and fatigue that we're constantly trying to find newer ways to, sort of reach our audience. And slow social is something that I see people now talking about. So it'll be great to get your views on this. Thank you.
Actually, Poonam, I am personally hooked to what you call slow content. You say slow social or slow content?
I said slow social because that's what I heard.
Yeah, I'm personally hooked on to it. Podcast, I'm hooked on because, you can be doing whatever and be listening to a podcast. So that's why I like podcasts. And there are some great podcasts out there. Unfortunately, there are a lot of people doing podcasts. It's now become a fashion to do podcasts, and sifting through the content to actually see what kind of podcast is really good is something which one must do. I would recommend for everybody who's listening in, there is a podcast called Business Breakdowns. They actually take one business at a time and break down the business. Very, very interesting. They take down, let's say, they will take an old traditional consulting firm like McKinsey and tell you everything on McKinsey and how it does. Or they'll take a new firm like Sky Mavis and tell you what Sky Mavis does. One, you must listen to it. My personal recommendation. The second one, newsletter. Actually, I'd met somebody who and whatever he told me stayed with me, and I think it's very interesting because he said that the email newsletter is now the new homepage. And I subscribe to the New York Times newsletter, the Bloomberg newsletter, and of course the Morning Context and the Ken, etc. And then I realized how much hooked on I am to newsletters. So personally speaking, I would say that these two are interesting mediums, but however, should one get into it, I would actually say no, because there are too many out there, and I don't know how we can actually compete with that, because at the most I have time to go through 5 or 6 newsletters or 7 newsletters in a day. So that's my take on slow social.
Great. Actually, the New York Times newsletter is as something which all communicators should study. It is done so well. It's worth the 60 rupees per week you pay for New York Times subscription. But I highly recommend it. Karan, Tuina, do you have a comment to offer as well on Poonam's question?
I'm actually one of those who love podcasts as well. I mean, I snack on a podcast show like at least one every day. And I found a fit during the pandemic because you just had so much passive time. So I found a fit, like with my evening runs, I hear at least one episode a day. And I'm a fan. Like my personal favorites would be Pivot from the US. I hear a lot of Indian content. I was initially hooked on to Cyrus Says from the IVM podcast networks. And I think Cyrus Brocha, I was a fan of him once, and then I became a fan again. And then there are many others. I think Varun Dugirala is like another podcasting prominent figure, and he runs a couple of interesting ones as well. I think the interesting space over there is I like the fact that I feel you get more credible points of view, whether it's through the newsletter space or the podcast space. Even the insights that are brought together, like, for instance, you find a lot of young startup people. Like yesterday, I was hearing a podcast of this, I think 19-year-old who has a sneaker company online, and the mainstream media would never cover him unless he got some funding, etc. But he spoke about culture in such an interesting way that that's why I hear podcasts. Like every time I hear such a episode, I'm like, this is why I tune into podcasts and I read newsletters, because you get niche points of view, you get interesting points of view, and you get credible points of view. So I'm a big fan. And I mean, even from a comms point of view, there are a couple of places that I definitely, expose my spokespeople to, because they do have an audience that regularly tunes in.
Very interesting. One final question, comment from Tuina, then we really have to wind up.
I wanted to probably talk from a B2B, and a counterintuitive point. The long forms, there is a beauty in the long form. It challenges your thought process, your point of view, when you want to change and influence a policy or regulation, or you want to learn something deeper, or a lot of these science and space stuff, whether it's a podcast or whether it's a long video or something that doesn't keep me on the hook of a character limitation or time limitation, but just allows me to flow and take me where I want to go, works, I think, Parul. Sometimes just switching off to switch on is important. So I don't know if it is a anti-slow content or slow content, but that works for me.
Thank you. I'd like to share the results of our poll. And sadly, podcasts, 0% of the audience today feels that podcast is something they should invest in. Karan Bhujbal, you'll be very pleased. 80% feel that short form video is very important, followed by AI and experiential formats. With that, I'd like to thank our lovely panel. It's been a really fascinating discussion. You actually carried on for a full hour, at least 20 minutes over our time. Thank you to the audience for listening in. We have a very interesting 3 real life case studies coming up, so don't go away. Thank you, Tuhina. Thank you, Sanjam. Thank you, Karan. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Parul.
Thank you
Thanks
very much.
Thank you so much,
and for a
Parul,
lovely
everyone.
conversation.
Great hearing you, Sanjam and Tuina. Bye.
So we have next with us a very interesting session coming up with Megha Tata. Megha, if you're there, could you switch on your video if you haven't already switched it on? There you are. I'd like to welcome Megha Tata, who is managing director of Discovery India and South Asia. She's going to give us a real life point of view on content generation in the world of OTT, and when OTT and Tata Sky coexist, not exactly coexist, but it is a world where both options are open to us. And she is going to also, during her session, she's also going to talk about the content strategy for one of their prime upcoming ongoing shows, which is with the author Amish, and it's on the Ramayan. And before Megha starts to speak, I'll quickly share the promo for that particular show, just so that we have a context.
एक गाथा
I hope you all can
जिसे
hear it.
सदियां खुद दोहराती है।
राम राम नाम में पूरा विश्व समाया हुआ है।
एक गाथा जो हिंदुस्तान के दिल में नजर आती है।
रामायण remains a living story in every Indian heart.
गाथा ये माँ सीता की, गाथा ये श्री राम की, गाथा ये रामायण की, भारत के अभिमान की। पर इस कहानी के कुछ पन्ने हैं जो खो गए हैं वक्त के फेरे में।
श्री राम को एग्जैक्टली 14 साल की वनवास क्यों हुई?
अब वक्त है उन्हें रोशनी में लाने का।
What we found in there was a sign which resembles the most modern spacecraft.
अब वक्त है रामायण के अनसुने रहस्य सुनाने का।
क्या इन पत्थरों से हुआ था राम सेतु का निर्माण? चारों भाइयों की एक सबसे बड़ी बहन थी, but where did she go?
जानिए रामायण के रहस्य। A Discovery Plus original, Legends of the Ramayan with Amish. अभी देखिए Discovery Plus ऐप पर।
Sorry, thank you. I hope the audio was heard for this. Was the audio audible for the promo?
Was a bit patchy, but I think people may have got the gist.
Okay, thank you, Megha. Thank you so much for joining us. Discovery is, I guess, an iconic part of our lives, really. And those of us who have, I would admittedly say, of a certain vintage, have grown up seeing Discovery on cable TV, no doubt. But now we just ran a promo where it said, go to the app and you'll be able to do what you want, discover the program on the Discovery app. So with that, I'd like to start the conversation with you, Megha. In this world of OTT, come cable, come cinema halls, come everything, how are you really planning the marketing and content placement of your own content so that it reaches people in the best way?
Well, thanks, Parul, first of all, for inviting me on this forum, and hello, everyone. It's lovely to be here. And I was listening to the previous conversation, was very intrigued by what's been spoken in the new age world we are all entering into, as we all know. And so hence, to your point, to your question, Parul, I think that's where the dichotomy of the new age existence lies in our ecosystem. We have realized that the world is changing, and so is the content habits and the content consumption habits, of course. But I also, India is one of the few countries in the world, I would say, wherein it is not an either or world; it is an and world. Both the traditional ecosystem or the traditional mediums are also growing, like television is growing, and so is the digital consumption. So I think there is a coexistence which can happen in our world, at least in India, and we're seeing that happen every day. So how one sort of works around it, and is the fact that you've got to be able to be where the consumer is. That is the bottom line. If consumer wants to be watching you on television, we need to be providing them content there. Whether they are in digital, we need to be providing there. I was just hearing about the podcast part. You need to be there. So wherever there is a consumer, you need to provide them. Consumer is God at the end of it. They are making the choices, and they're spoiled for choices. So if you're not able to provide them where they want to see, what they want to see at the time they want to see, you're going to have a very challenging time to have a business which exists. So for us as well, Discovery, and now of course we have Warner Brothers Discovery, as you may know. So as an organization, we are very cognizant of the fact that we need to be providing content in all platforms, and that's how we go about in planning. So whether there is no you can't be on either. I mean, there has to be a way to balance it. But what comes where is a business call you take on a day-to-day basis. So for me, it is more about ability to deliver content wherever the consumer wants it, whenever he or she wants it. So that's how we, by and large, try to work our business as well.
Thank you, Megha. Before I ask you the second question, a quick correction. Megha's correct designation is Managing Director, South Asia, Warner Brothers Discovery, my mistake. Of course, as we all know, it's CNN as well is also under Warner Brothers, as is Discovery. Megha, my next question to you is that during COVID, the OTT, the way it really took off, and now there's a kind of a rationalization taking place. In a way, some platforms have seen their numbers rationalized. And they are considering all kinds of payment models to boost up revenue. Given all those developments in mind, and given that Discovery is a publisher of very high quality content, this is highly editorial content that Discovery does. Keeping that in mind, how do you think you'll be evolving your content strategy for India?
There are, I say this pretty often, there are many Indias within India. So there is no one size which fits all. And just like I said, not only is the consumer the king, she also or he also decides what kind of content they would like to watch, because they have the freedom and the ability and the technology today to do that, unlike say maybe 2 decades ago, where there was not much choice. Whatever you provide, they had to consume. Today, they have a choice, and they're spoiled for choice. So I think for businesses, by and large, and not just us, but across every ecosystem, every set of audiences need to get catered for. And you need to, as a business, you need to decide what's your cohort, what is your focus area, where is your business model, where is the USP you bring to the table, is what every business decides. And to me, I think in this crazy competitive world, and while linear has something like 800 channels you're competing with, even OTT today you're talking about 45 platforms. So it's a very competitive environment. So I think it is the differentiation of content which will play out, Parul. Even when we launched Discovery Plus, one of the key differentiating factor we brought to the table, and we came at a time when there were already 30 plus players in the market. But one of the key things we realized was that everyone was fighting the fiction war. Everyone was fighting the fiction entertainment game, right? But there was no platform like ours. We created the nonfiction or the reality television or the real life entertainment content in a large platform like ours. When we bring that kind of pedigree, where you have something like 300,000 hours of content available, global content, it's an amazing opportunity for consumers to sample that. And you Indianize it, you make it more relatable by obviously bringing it into the languages of their choice. So today we are available in 8 languages, and that makes it so much more relatable for the audiences sitting across any part of the country. But to make that a bit more nuanced and make it a bit more sort of relatable, further deepening a connection with the Indian audiences, we started launching our original content piece, which is obviously doing really well. And one of the shows you just shared was Legends of Ramayana, which is of course doing extremely well. It's our sleeper hit. as we speak. We also felt very consciously that, how do we create this business model? So while we are a very SWOT proposition, skewed towards SWOT, where it's a subscriber paid model. And after many years, subscriber is ready to pay for content, it's a dream we as industry professionals, we've been wanting for very long. So finally, the consumer is paying for content. So that is our focus. But it is going to be a balance. The AVOD, the advertising model is of course, ideally it's best to have both, but the economics of that also needs to work, because we've also seen some of the AVOD players struggling overall in the advertising growth ecosystem, because it's a challenge. So I think it's a combination of the two and the balancing of the two, which probably would be an ideal world scenario.
That's really interesting. What kind of branded opportunities, and I'm going to come back more to this question later, but what kind of, given the subscription model is finally people are like sort of saying, okay, I'll grudgingly or however, but I'll reach into my pocket and pay up. So I have 2-3 parts to this question. Firstly, that what do you think about the ad-based model, and what kind of opportunities do you think it offers brands to be on the kind of content that Discovery provides? The second part of the question is, I don't know if it is directly related, but the kind of bundling that Amazon Video does, subscribe separately to Hayu or to Lionsgate, that kind of bundling approach, what is your opinion on, not asking for your opinion on Prime, Amazon Prime, but this kind of bundling approach? So these 2 questions I have.
Yeah. I mean, on the bundling piece, Parul, of course, it is, that is how the business models, I mean, that's how, that is the new world way, to be honest. Bundling will be a part of the proposition to grow our subscriber base, and so hence, whether it is with platforms like Jio or PVC, which is the Prime Video channel. So, there are different platforms we are looking at partnerships. So back-end partnership integration and bundling is definitely a play which every OTT platform is doing and will do. And this is nothing new. It's not true only to India. It happens globally, and that is the way the B2B tie-ups sort of plays out. So while D2C continues to be a key focus for most of the OTT platform, partnerships and on the B2B front are also that much more critical. So both are important. As far as advertising is concerned, I think, like I mentioned earlier as well, it's a tough play. It's not an easy play, because like, for example, for us, our advertising growth still is coming from our traditional business, which is linear television. OTT is an interesting play for advertising, but it's a different game, where you're competing with large mass players. It becomes a little, it's a very difficult environment to bring in that kind of competitive edge, so to speak, because we are a very special interest proposition. Having said that, I think what really would work, just like how it worked in television for us, is the branded content play. So a lot of content which we put together on our television network, and we are probably one of the top players in the market who brings the award-winning content for our brand. So brand integration and brand solution is really evolved over the last few years, and I'm proud to say that we had a big role to play in that, and that to me is a proposition or an opportunity as well for the OTT play too. So I think if we can just evaluate the platforms outside of the pure play advertising, which is the vanilla advertising, and see this as a more integrated play and on the platform, I think there are opportunities for sure.
That's very interesting. In fact, yesterday I was watching Guilty Minds on Amazon Video, and there's a lot of not so subtle but sweetly done integration of Alexa. So I thought that is it was done nicely. It was not like here's an ad, or the famous scan of billboards which you see in Bollywood scenes and maybe even Jandubam, but it was nicely done. Coming to the feature that you're doing with Amish, I think it's really very intelligent, and I definitely look forward to catching it because it's like what you said. It is real life content about a story which has absolutely very deep appeal for Indians. yet it's a modernish uptake. It's almost like, something like maybe a Rick Riordan has done with Greek mythology, and other writers are doing, and you've kind of giving it a modern twist. So given that in mind, what kind of channels are you pursuing for its telecast or airing? I don't know what is the right word for it. Streaming.
Streaming, we're bringing it to our consumer. That's, like I said, wherever the consumer is, we want to take our content there. So currently, of course, it's streaming on Discovery Plus. We launched it. It's a 3-episoder. And like you rightly said, I mean, Ramayana is an epic. We all know about Ramayana. I mean, it's like Amish said in one interaction that, rarely would you find anybody who's not heard about Ramayana, irrespective of the religion they represent. So I think while Ramayana is deep rooted in our country, and where, the origins of it and the story of it, I think the way this show has brought about an intrigue and the revelatory aspect of and we've taken Ramayana, like, addressed Ramayana like a travelogue. It's like so it's a new age lens and a discovery lens of an age old epic. So that combination, I think, has connected really well with our audiences, and we're getting so much love from them, which is, we're really humbled with that. And it just has brought two things in my view. One is, of course, the contemporarization of an age-old epic. And the second is bringing it closer to the younger generation, So while a lot of people in the older generation may know about it, maybe even the younger one do, but the way it has been portrayed has sort of played out really well, and of course it's doing extremely well. And of course we have a lot of marketing and PR planned behind it. Amish is a great orator. Like we were joking, he surely has a second career handy in case he decides to not be an author. He's done a fantastic job. I don't know if you've seen the show, but if you haven't, I urge you to. Not because it's on Discovery Plus, but just I genuinely feel it's a fantastic show, which has really come out really well. And so yeah, of course, there's a lot of push behind it, and it's getting all the love it deserves. And I think what we try to do out of this show is that, Discovery, of course, has been known for a lot of adventure content and a lot of military content, and, that space, which is something which we've been doing. But we also know, the plus of Discovery Plus gave us an opportunity to explore different genres. And we did. And, whether it is a high profile celebrity food show like Star versus Food, which did extremely well for us as well, or a martial arts show with Vidyut Jamwal, called India's Ultimate Warrior, or the investigative content we've been doing, whether it's Dangles of Crime or Money Mafia, and now this mythological docu-series called Legends of Ramayana. We're just delving in different spaces. So, we have the platform, fortunately, to explore and bring into our Indian audiences. People love their fiction fix. We all love it. Even I do. We all want our fiction fix. Absolutely. But it doesn't mean that content like this, there is no audience for that. And that is what Discovery Plus has proven, that there is an audience to consume content like this if you provide them what they want. Like I said, it's an and proposition. We're a complementary play. You can watch your fiction content, but you would also like to watch content like what is provided by Discovery Plus. And that's why shows like Legends of Ramayana and many such shows are doing extremely well on our platform.
I have one or two final questions before we throw it open. The audience can start sharing their questions in the chat box. We can take a couple of questions in a bit. Megha, my next question really is that, of course, the Ramayana property is your marquee property. Can you give us an example of another show, or you, of course, just mentioned some, but overall, could you help us understand through another example of how content is being spread across various platforms, Discovery content?
Oh, yeah. I mean, see, for example, our marquee franchise called Into the Wild, right? I mean, it came into a mass platform when we, of course, had our Prime Minister Modi come with Bear Grylls onto that show, and that, of course, created a lot of noise and audiences for us. So, in fact, that time, our channel, Discovery Linear, became the #1 channel in the country that day, beating all the big GCs. So that clearly tells that differentiated content speaks louder than the words, so to speak. So I think that got us really upfront, and then we been able to bring a lot. That gave us the confidence, really, Parul, to bring in, say, okay, let's invest in a bit more aggressively in our original content. And then we had Rajnikant, then we had Akshay Kumar, and Vicky Kaushal, and all these big names which started coming into our platform, which of course created that audience connection. But then we with these different genres we started playing, we realized that it both have a way to play out on linear as well as on the digital platform. So there are sometimes we do, for example, into shows, some of the Into the Wilds we did an exclusive on Discovery Plus for a period of time before it came onto television. And sometimes we've done shows like, say, India's Ultimate Warrior, which was like almost simultaneously aired together, right? But now, say, Legends of Ramayana is on Discovery Plus exclusive for some time before at some point it come on to television. So these are business calls you take, but the beauty is that you're creating content which has the capability to reside on both the platforms. And that is the advantage of playing with the linear and digital. And that's something I think we definitely find value because it plays to the advertisers' need as well as to the subscribers' needs.
Will we see the Ramayana series as a special theatre release with the special prizes for children perhaps in the summer?
Now that's a point. Let me ponder.
I can understand why you would not like to say right now. So Megha, this has been a wonderful example. Before I let you go, one final question. You talked about how it can't be the same vanilla old school advertising on shows like Discovery. What would you think would be good features of a good branded partnership?
Oh, I'll need another show to do that with you, Parul, because it is like we have so many examples, whether it is shows about startups or, we did a fantastic show with Jeep where we actually took went up to the Ladakh terrain and where we drove with the Jeep inside. So this is not about just how do I call it? Like a classic product placement thing. No. It's very integrated to the brand proposition, which is why so many brand managers and CMOs love what we bring to the table. And the proof of the pudding is that they keep coming back. And I think to me as I've been a salesperson and I know, a first sale is easy relatively. But if a client comes back to you, that means you've done your job well, right? So you've worked with a client based on, you've been able to provide the brand or the client a genuine partnership onto the table, not just like I've done one deal and got some money in the bank, right? So when you see the repetition of that content happening, I think one of our biggest success examples is with Byju's. When we do the Byju's Discovery School Super League. It's one of the biggest franchises for us, reaching thousands of lakhs of students in thousands of schools across the country. And we're back. They've been with us for the last 3 seasons and now going to be back for the 4th. That just talks about how you integrate the brand into the product and the brand and the program. So that's something we do extremely well, and happy to share more examples, but I'm sure you wouldn't have that much time, but that is what we really take pride in, of the brand solutions propositions we bring for our clients.
Thank you. Actually, that's really interesting because so one final question, I promise, is that when there is a natural link with travel brands and with education, especially I guess non-linear or new styles of education. Apart from these two broad categories, what do you see as a good content fit for good brand fit for the kind of content you do? I mean, I don't mean asking you to name names, but sectors.
No, I mean, see, the auto, fintech, edtech, pharma, I mean, or even lifestyle brands for TLC, for example, or food products for TLC. These are some things we do. Something we do extremely well is in our kids space. D-Kids, Discovery Kids is one of our formidable kid player in the industry, and one of our biggest franchise called Little Singham, who has stolen many hearts across all the children and their parents. We have a fantastic, integration we've done with Jolly Rancher, and you've got to see that to believe it. Almost is so beautifully. It's a whole animation integrated with the product. Now that kind of, this is money can't buy kind of integrations which take for brands. And imagine watching Little Singham eat Jolly Rancher or talk about the product in an animated world, and that's the kind of value we bring to the table, and the ability to turn, to make that integrations happen. So we have many such examples. So all these genre or these categories, they have a space, something for TLC, something for Discovery, something for D-Kids, and that's something we hope to continue doing even in the coming years. Yeah.
Thank you, Megha. Thank you so much for your time on a Monday afternoon, and it's been a fascinating listen to all that you've said. And Discovery is such an iconic channel that it's great to see that how it's like not only keeping with the times, but probably outpacing some of the GEC channels, like you said, with content like you did with Bear. So thank you so much for your time. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Parul. Thank you, everyone. Bye.
So thank you, Megha. With that, we move on to Rajat from Microsoft Stories.